Have you noticed how some messages arrive too late? Not because they were sent late. Not because the person forgot. But because the person who was meant to receive them was distracted by everything else happening around them. Today, what you are about to hear feels exactly like one of those messages. And before you dismiss it, before you tell yourself this is just another video, listen carefully. Because the energy surrounding this reading is different. There is urgency here. There is emotion here. And there is someone connected to your soul whose heart is carrying something they can no longer hide. What makes this unusual is that this person has reached a breaking point. Not a breaking point of hatred. Not a breaking point of indifference. A breaking point of exhaustion. They have been carrying feelings they never fully expressed. They have been holding conversations inside their own mind that never reached your ears. They have imagined reaching out. They have imagined hearing your voice. They have imagined what would happen if everything between you finally became clear. But now, something has changed. And that change is why you were guided to this moment. Because the message coming through is direct. Your soulmate is standing at an emotional crossroads. One path tells them to keep hoping. The other path tells them to walk away forever. And for some of you, that decision is much closer than you realize. Now don't panic. Listen. Because this isn't about fear. This is about awareness. Awareness of what has been happening behind the scenes while you were focused on your own life. There is a reason this title found you. There is a reason your attention stopped here. And there is a reason your intuition whispered, "Watch this." The truth is that your soulmate has been fighting a silent battle. To everyone else they appear normal. They smile. They work. They go through daily routines. But beneath the surface something keeps pulling them back toward thoughts of you. Your name enters their mind unexpectedly. Songs remind them of you. Random places remind them of you. Certain dates remind them of you. And every time it happens, they tell themselves the same thing. I need to move on. Yet somehow they never completely do. Because the connection refuses to disappear. And that is where the struggle begins. You see, when someone loves deeply but receives uncertainty, confusion begins to grow. Questions begin to multiply. Doubts begin to multiply. Fear begins to multiply. Eventually they reach a moment where they ask themselves something painful. Am I waiting for something that will never happen? That question has been echoing through your soulmate's heart. Again and again. Late at night. Early in the morning. In quiet moments when nobody else is around. And recently, that question became louder than ever. Because something happened. Not necessarily one dramatic event. Not necessarily one shocking conversation. But a series of moments that made them feel invisible. A series of moments that made them wonder whether the universe was giving them a sign to let go. And when they felt that, something inside them shifted. For the first time, they seriously considered saying goodbye. Not because they stopped caring. Because caring hurt too much. Let that sink in. The person connected to your soul has not been trying to forget you. They have been trying to protect themselves. There is a difference. A massive difference. And many people never recognize it. Someone can love you deeply and still decide to leave. Not because the love disappeared. Because the pain became stronger than the hope. That is the energy surrounding this reading. But there is another side to this story. A side nobody talks about. A side your soulmate has hidden from nearly everyone. They have been receiving signs too. Unexpected signs. Strange signs. Moments they cannot explain logically. Dreams. Repeated numbers. Memories appearing out of nowhere. Conversations about love showing up unexpectedly. People mentioning situations that sound exactly like yours. The universe has been speaking to them. And every time they try to walk away emotionally, something pulls them back. That is why their goodbye has never fully happened. That is why the door remains slightly open. That is why the story remains unfinished. Because there is unfinished energy here. Unfinished emotions. Unfinished words. And most importantly, unfinished truth. There is something your soulmate wants you to know. Something they have never fully said. Something that has been trapped inside their chest for far too long. The truth is that they expected you to understand them without them speaking. They expected you to see what they felt. They expected the connection itself to communicate everything. But life doesn't work that way. Silence creates misunderstandings. Distance creates assumptions. And assumptions create separation. Your soulmate realizes this now. They understand that many things went unsaid. Many things went unresolved. Many feelings were hidden behind pride, fear, confusion, or timing. And because of that, both of you ended up standing on opposite sides of the same emotional wall. Wanting connection. But unable to reach each other. The heartbreaking part is this. They never wanted to become a stranger to you. Never. Even during moments when they acted distant. Even during moments when they appeared cold. Even during moments when they convinced themselves they were done. A part of them was still listening. Still watching. Still wondering. Still hoping. But hope can only survive uncertainty for so long. That is why the current energy feels urgent. Because your soulmate has been telling themselves that if nothing changes soon, they must finally release the attachment. They must finally stop waiting. They must finally choose themselves. And honestly, part of them believes they are ready. Yet another part of them is terrified. Because letting go means accepting a future without you. And that thought breaks their heart more than they admit. There is something else coming through strongly. Regret. Not small regret. Deep regret. Regret over conversations that never happened. Regret over opportunities missed. Regret over emotions hidden. Regret over waiting too long. Your soulmate has replayed certain memories hundreds of times. Maybe thousands. They have imagined alternate versions of events. Different choices. Different words. Different outcomes. And every version leads them back to the same realization. They wish they had been more honest. more vulnerable, more courageous. Because now they understand something important. Time is not guaranteed. Opportunities are not guaranteed. People are not guaranteed. And love should never be taken for granted. That realization has shaken them profoundly. It has forced them to confront emotions they spent a long time avoiding. And as they confront those emotions, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. They still care. More than they wanted to admit. More than they tried to hide. More than logic can explain. But caring alone is no longer enough. Something must change. That is the message. Something must change. Because the current situation cannot continue forever. The universe itself is pushing toward a decision. Toward movement. Toward clarity. Toward truth. No more hiding. No more pretending. No more emotional limbo. And that pressure is building rapidly. Your soulmate feels it. You may feel it too. There is an invisible countdown happening. An emotional countdown. A spiritual countdown. A moment approaching when choices can no longer be postponed. And when that moment arrives, everything becomes clear. One way or another. Now listen carefully. This next part is important. The goodbye your soulmate is considering is not necessarily physical. For many of you, it is emotional. They are thinking about closing the chapter in their heart. Closing the space they reserved for you. Closing the dreams they built around you. And that is why the energy feels so intense. Because once someone truly closes that space, reopening it becomes much harder. Not impossible. But harder. The universe is highlighting this because there is still time. Still possibility. Still potential. Still unfinished business between souls. And that unfinished business refuses to disappear. No matter how far either of you travel. No matter how much time passes. No matter how many distractions appear. The connection remains. That is why this reading found you. Not to scare you. But to wake you up. To remind you that meaningful connections deserve awareness. They deserve honesty. They deserve courage. Because sometimes the greatest tragedy is not rejection. The greatest tragedy is never knowing what could have happened. Your soulmate knows this now. That realization keeps them awake. That realization follows them everywhere. And recently, something extraordinary happened. They had a moment of absolute clarity. A moment where all the noise disappeared. A moment where excuses disappeared. A moment where fear disappeared. And in that moment they admitted something to themselves. They never truly wanted to say goodbye. They only wanted the pain to stop. Think about that. They never wanted to lose you. They wanted relief from uncertainty. Those are very different things. And understanding that difference changes everything. Because it reveals what is actually happening beneath the surface. This is not a story about disappearing love. This is a story about wounded hope. A story about delayed truth. A story about two paths standing before one soul. And right now your soulmate is standing between those paths, looking in both directions, trying to decide which future to choose. One future carries surrender. The other carries courage. One future says walk away. The other says speak the truth. One future closes the door. The other knocks on it one final time. The question is, which future will they choose? The answer is closer than you think. Because the energy around them is accelerating. Events are moving. Emotions are rising. Truths are surfacing. And the universe is creating conditions where honesty becomes unavoidable. The silence cannot survive much longer. The distance cannot survive much longer. The uncertainty cannot survive much longer. Something is about to shift. A realization. A message. A conversation. A moment. Something. And when it happens, many pieces suddenly make sense. Until then, remember this. Your soulmate's heart is not empty. It is full. Full of emotions. Full of memories. Full of questions. Full of hope. And yes, full of fear. But beneath all of it remains one undeniable truth. The connection still matters. Far more than either of you may realize. And that is why this message arrived today. Because sometimes the universe sends warnings. Not warnings of disaster. Warnings of missed opportunities. Warnings of words left unsaid. Warnings of hearts remaining silent when they should speak. Your soulmate stands near that threshold now. The threshold between holding on and letting go. Between silence and truth. Between goodbye and another chance. The next chapter has not been written yet. The ending has not been decided yet. And somewhere deep within their heart, despite everything they have experienced, despite every disappointment, despite every doubt, a quiet voice continues to whisper one final question. What if? What if the story isn't over? What if the connection is real? What if the goodbye never needed to happen? And until that question is answered, their soul will continue searching for the truth. The same truth that brought you here today. The same truth that refuses to disappear. The same truth that says this connection is standing at a turning point. A turning point that could change everything. That turning point is closer than either of you realize. Because while your soulmate has been standing at the edge of an emotional goodbye, something unexpected has begun happening behind the scenes. They thought they were becoming stronger. They thought they were finally learning how to live without thinking about you. They thought they were finally closing the chapter. But the opposite happened. The harder they tried to silence their feelings, the louder those feelings became. And that terrified them. Because they expected distance to create freedom. Instead, distance created clarity. They began noticing something they had ignored for a long time. Every future they imagined without you felt incomplete. Not necessarily because you were physically present in every dream. But because your energy had become part of the story they told themselves about happiness. And once they realized that, everything changed. Suddenly they couldn't pretend anymore. Suddenly they couldn't keep lying to themselves. Suddenly they couldn't keep repeating the same excuse. I don't care anymore. Because deep inside, they knew it wasn't true. In fact, there was one particular moment that shook them completely. A moment nobody else knows about. A moment they haven't shared with anyone. They were alone. Thinking. Reflecting. Trying to convince themselves to move on. And then a memory appeared. Not just any memory. A memory connected to you. A specific detail. A specific feeling. A specific moment. And for a few seconds it felt as if time stopped. Everything came rushing back. The emotions. The hopes. The dreams. The possibilities. The connection. It hit them so strongly that they had to sit down. Because they suddenly realized how much of their heart was still attached to you. That realization brought tears. Not because they are weak. Because truth can be overwhelming when you spend a long time avoiding it. Your soulmate has been carrying that truth ever since. Trying to understand it. Trying to process it. Trying to figure out what it means. And while they were doing that, another revelation arrived. One that completely changed their perspective. They realized they had been looking at the situation through fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of disappointment. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of being the one who cares more. But fear distorts reality. Fear creates stories that may not even be true. Fear convinces people to walk away from things they actually want. And your soulmate finally saw that. For the first time, they began questioning their own assumptions. What if they misunderstood something? What if they gave up too soon? What if the signs they interpreted as endings were actually invitations to be patient? What if the story wasn't finished? These questions started growing inside them. And the more they grew, the harder it became to say goodbye. Because goodbye requires certainty. And certainty is exactly what they don't have. Instead, they have feelings. Strong feelings. Persistent feelings. Unresolved feelings. Feelings that refuse to disappear. Now there is something very important you need to understand. Your soulmate has changed. Not in the way most people think. Not because circumstances changed. Not because their appearance changed. Not because their lifestyle changed. Their heart changed. The experiences they've gone through recently forced them to mature emotionally. Forced them to look deeper. Forced them to understand themselves. And through that process, they discovered something surprising. They discovered that real connections are rare. Extremely rare. Most people spend years searching for what they felt with you. Some never find it at all. And that realization has become impossible for them to ignore. Because once someone recognizes the value of a connection, losing it feels different. It feels heavier. It feels more significant. It feels more permanent. That is why your soulmate's emotions are reaching a peak right now. Because they are finally understanding what is truly at stake. They are no longer looking at this situation through temporary emotions. They are looking at it through the lens of the future. And when they imagine years passing without resolution, their heart becomes restless. Because deep inside they don't want unanswered questions. They don't want unfinished stories. They don't want to spend the rest of their life wondering. That fear of regret is becoming stronger than their fear of vulnerability. Read that again in your mind. Their fear of regret is becoming stronger than their fear of vulnerability. And that is a major shift. Because regret has a unique power. It forces people to act. It forces people to speak. It forces people to take risks they once avoided. Your soulmate is entering that energy now. Slowly. Quietly. But undeniably. There is another message coming through very clearly. Someone around them has noticed. Not everything. But enough. A friend. A family member. Someone close. Someone who has observed the changes. Observed the distractions. Observed the emotional weight they carry. This person recently said something that struck your soulmate deeply. Something simple. Yet powerful. They said, "If someone means that much to you, why are you still silent?" Those words landed like lightning. Because they exposed a truth your soulmate had been avoiding. Silence was no longer protecting them. Silence was hurting them. And once they realized that, the emotional pressure intensified. Now every day feels different. Every day feels like a countdown. Not toward an ending. Toward a decision. A decision that can no longer be postponed forever. And the universe seems determined to push them toward it. Signs continue appearing. Memories continue appearing. Dreams continue appearing. Coincidences continue appearing. Almost as if life itself refuses to let the connection fade quietly. The strange thing is that your soulmate keeps asking for signs. And then signs appear. They ask for clarity. And then clarity appears. They ask for guidance. And then guidance appears. At some point, they began wondering whether the universe was trying to tell them something. Whether all these experiences actually meant something. Whether there was a reason your energy keeps returning to their thoughts. That question opened a door. A door they had kept locked for a very long time. And once it opened, emotions they buried began pouring out. Love. Longing. Hope. Curiosity. Yearning. Every feeling they thought had disappeared suddenly returned. Not weakly. Powerfully. And now they stand face to face with those emotions. Unable to ignore them. Unable to escape them. Unable to explain them away. There is one memory in particular they revisit often. A moment that symbolizes everything. A moment that represents what could have been. Whenever they think about saying goodbye, that memory appears. As if their soul refuses to let them forget. As if their heart is reminding them what truly matters. And every time it happens, the same thought follows. Maybe I should try one more time. Not because they expect perfection. Not because they expect guarantees. But because they need truth. Real truth. Not assumptions. Not fears. Not stories created by uncertainty. Truth. The kind of truth that only comes from honesty. And honesty is becoming unavoidable. Your soulmate feels it. The universe feels it. Even the energy surrounding this connection feels it. A breakthrough is approaching. The walls are weakening. The resistance is weakening. The silence is weakening. Something is preparing to emerge. And when it does, it will reveal emotions that have been hidden for much longer than anyone realizes. But before that happens, there is one final challenge your soulmate must overcome. The challenge of courage. Because courage is what separates dreams from reality. Courage is what transforms feelings into actions. Courage is what turns "what if" into answers. And right now, your soulmate is gathering that courage. Piece by piece. Day by day. Moment by moment. They are realizing that saying goodbye forever may feel safe. But safety is not always fulfillment. Sometimes fulfillment requires risk. Sometimes fulfillment requires vulnerability. Sometimes fulfillment requires speaking the words that have remained trapped inside the heart. And those words are closer to being spoken than ever before. The energy is building. The pressure is building. The awareness is building. Everything is moving toward a moment of truth. A moment when masks fall. A moment when fear loses power. A moment when honesty finally wins. And when that moment arrives, your soulmate will have a choice. Walk away carrying unanswered questions forever. Or step forward carrying the truth. The remarkable thing is that their heart already knows which choice it wants. Their heart has known for a long time. It was fear that created confusion. It was fear that created delay. It was fear that created distance. But fear is losing its grip. And as fear weakens, love becomes easier to hear. That is why the message today feels so urgent. Not because an ending is guaranteed, but because a decision is approaching. A decision capable of changing everything. Your soulmate is standing in front of that decision now. Closer than ever. Looking at the door they almost closed forever. And for the first time in a very long time. Instead of locking it, they are considering opening it. Completely. Honestly. Fearlessly. Because somewhere deep within their soul, beyond all doubts and worries, beyond every disappointment and delay, beyond every reason they tried to let go, one truth continues shining brighter than everything else.